The church doors slammed open with a harsh bang that echoed through the marble hall. Gasps filled the room. Cameras clicked frantically. Alessia Monroe froze halfway down the aisle, her bouquet trembling in her hands. She had never imagined that this day, the day she was supposed to marry Ethan Cole, would start like this. Ethan's voice, firm and cold, carried across the room. I can't do this. The words cut through the air like a blade. Guests turned in confusion, whispers rippling through the crowd. Alessia's heart skipped a beat, her knees threatening to buckle. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely audible over the murmurs. Her father, Richard Monroe, tightened his grip on her arm, but his expression was rigid, unreadable. Ethan took a slow step back, his eyes avoiding hers. I'm in love with someone else," he admitted. Alessia's best friend, Clara James, who had been walking beside her, gasped audibly. "No. Ethan, don't do this." Clara's voice trembled, but Ethan ignored her. The crowd seemed to hold its breath, the tension so thick it was almost tangible. Alessia's mother, Margaret Monroe, clutched her hands to her chest. "Richard, what is happening?" she whispered, panic edging her voice. Then, with all the poise and arrogance she was known for, Vanessa Hart entered. She strode confidently down the aisle, her heels clicking against the polished marble floor. The murmurs grew louder as everyone realized who she was. Vanessa's eyes locked on Ethan, and a satisfied smirk curled on her lips. Alessia's breath caught in her throat. She had known of Vanessa, everybody in town had, but never imagined she would appear here, at her wedding, on the very day Ethan was supposed to promise her forever. Clara grabbed Alessia's hand. "Stay calm, Alessia. Don't let him see you break." But Alessia could hardly move. Every step forward felt like dragging her heart across broken glass. Ethan extended his hand to Vanessa, and the crowd gasped again. "This is the woman I love," he said, as if announcing it were something to boast about. Alessia's mother cried out. "How dare you humiliate her like this?" Margaret's voice shook with fury. Richard stepped forward, his jaw tight. "Ethan Cole. Step back and explain yourself." Ethan finally looked at them, arrogance masking any shred of guilt. "I can't marry someone I don't love. Alessia, you deserve to know." Alessia's knees nearly gave out, and she gripped Clara's hand tighter. Tears welled in her eyes, blurring the vision of everyone she had ever trusted. Guests whispered, some in shock, some in sympathy. The wedding she had dreamed of since she was a little girl had turned into a nightmare. From the corner of the church, Lucas Bennett stood quietly, his fists clenched at his sides. His mother, Mrs. Bennett, placed a hand on his shoulder. "Lucas, breathe. Remember why you're here," she whispered softly. Her eyes were full of understanding, full of knowing. She had always known Lucas's heart had belonged to Alessia long before Ethan had ever come along. Victoria Sterling, the wealthy heiress who had long harbored feelings for Lucas, observed the scene with thinly veiled disappointment. Her eyes were glued to Lucas, hoping for a reaction, hoping that maybe finally, today, he would notice her. But Lucas's eyes were fixed entirely on Alessia, and her heart ached as if it had been physically struck. Clara whispered, "Lucas, please, do something." But Lucas only tightened his jaw, silent for a moment, as Alessia's heartbreak tore across the room. The priest, frozen in the middle of the ceremony, looked helpless. "Ethan, this isn't how a wedding should happen," he finally said. Ethan scoffed. "It's exactly how it should happen. I follow my heart." Vanessa clung to his arm, radiant with the thrill of conquest. Every step she took down the aisle toward him felt like a knife twisting deeper into Alessia's chest. Alessia's mother moved closer to her daughter, whispering urgently, "Alessia, remember who you are. Stand tall. Don't let him see you cry." Alessia swallowed hard, trying to summon the courage she didn't feel. Every eye in the church was on her, every whisper like a weight pressing her down. Clara turned toward her. Remember, this isn't the end. Not for you, she said fiercely. Alessia managed a small nod, though her hands still shook. Suddenly, Lucas moved. Quietly, he stepped forward. The church seemed to fall silent as he walked toward the altar. Victoria Sterling's eyes widened, her hand instinctively rising to her chest. Lucas, no, she whispered, disbelief and anger mingled in her voice. Alessia's tears fell freely now, her white gown absorbing her silent sobs. She couldn't believe how everything she had hoped for had crumbled in moments. Ethan stood arrogantly, thinking he had won, but the tension in the air shifted as Lucas approached. His presence carried authority, calm, and something Alessia had always trusted in him, safety. The priest cleared his throat nervously. Is this going to continue? Lucas finally stopped in front of Alessia. I think it's time someone said what needed to be said, he began, his voice steady, though every word carried weight. Ethan's smug expression faltered slightly, but Vanessa's smirk remained. Alessia blinked, confused. Lucas, she whispered. Her heart was a chaotic storm. I've loved you for years, Lucas said quietly but firmly. I couldn't tell you before because you were happy with him. But I can't stand by today and watch you think you're not enough. The church was frozen in silence. Margaret Monroe clutched her daughter's arm tightly. Richard Monroe's jaw tightened as he finally realized the gravity of Lucas's intervention. Clara gasped audibly. Facade slipping for the first time. Ethan's eyes narrowed. What are you doing? He asked, anger rising. I'm giving her the choice she deserves, Lucas said calmly, extending his hand to Alessia. Alessia's lips trembled. She glanced at Ethan and Vanessa, at the faces of the guests, and finally met Lucas's gaze. For the first time today, she saw something real, something unshakable. She placed her hand gently in Lucas's. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Clara let out a soft cry of relief. Margaret Monroe's tears streamed freely, but this time they were tears of pride. Richard Monroe nodded slowly, acknowledging the men who had finally given his daughter the respect she deserved. Victoria Sterling looked on in disbelief. Her chest tightened. She had dreamed of this moment for years, but it wasn't hers to claim. Lucas's heart belonged elsewhere, and today, the world was reminded of that truth. Ethan's face drained of color. He had believed he had orchestrated the perfect move, the ultimate betrayal, but now, he saw the power he had underestimated. Alessia, though humiliated moments ago, stood taller than ever, and Lucas's presence beside her only amplified her grace. Alessia finally breathed deeply, steadied by Lucas's calm energy. She lifted her chin, her eyes sparkling with renewed determination. Thank you, she whispered softly to Lucas. For noticing me, for standing up for me, for everything. Lucas smiled, a quiet warmth radiating from him. You've always been enough, Alessia. Today, you just needed to be reminded. The church erupted into whispered admiration. Guests clapped softly, some cheering in awe. Clara embraced Alessia tightly. Margaret and Richard's expressions softened as they saw their daughter surrounded not by humiliation, but by the respect and love she deserved. Ethan's jaw tightened. Vanessa's confidence faltered. Their plan to shock and humiliate had backfired spectacularly. Alessia finally looked at Lucas fully, letting herself smile genuinely. The pain of the morning dissolved into a radiant glow. In Lucas, she saw everything she had longed for, safety, loyalty, and the promise of love that would never abandon her. And as they walked down the aisle together, hand in hand, the entire church seemed to witness a new beginning. Maybe the wedding I thought I wanted wasn't meant for me, Alessia whispered softly. Lucas squeezed her hand, whispering back, no, it was always meant to lead you here. Alessia looked up at him, her eyes shining with love and relief. The humiliation, the heartbreak, the shock, all of it had led to this perfect, unexpected, and romantic beginning. Clara and the Monroe parents followed, smiling, relieved, and full of joy. Victoria Sterling turned to leave quietly, her dreams shattered but her dignity intact. She had lost Lucas to Alessia, but she would remember this lesson: love cannot be forced. The church bells rang, a new chapter had begun. Alessia, once dumped and humiliated, was now walking forward with someone who truly loved her, with the world watching in awe. Lucas leaned close to her ear. "I've waited years for this moment." Alessia smiled, her heart finally at peace. "And I've waited my whole life for someone like you." The wedding may have been destroyed, but Alessia had found the love she deserved, and nothing, and no one, could take that away. The crowd cheered, some wiping tears. And in that moment, Alessia realized something important: even when the world tries to break you, love finds a way to make everything right. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment below to see more stories just like this one. Who knows what will happen next? As Lucas guided Alessia down the aisle, her heart was still racing. The whispers of the guests faded into the background, replaced by the thundering of her own pulse. Clara walked beside them, her hand brushing Alessia's shoulder occasionally, silently reminding her that she wasn't alone. Margaret and Richard followed closely, their eyes softened with relief but still sharp with protective fire. Victoria Sterling's gaze burned into Lucas like fire. She could barely believe what she was witnessing. Her plan, her calculated hope that today would finally make Lucas look at her, had failed spectacularly. Her lips pressed into a thin line. "This isn't over," she muttered under her breath, barely loud enough for Mrs. Bennet to hear. Mrs. Bennet's eyes narrowed, knowing exactly what Victoria was thinking. Meanwhile, Vanessa Hart whispered into Ethan's ear, her voice sweet but laced with arrogance. "I told you this would humiliate her, and it did. Are you happy now?" Ethan's expression was conflicted. He had wanted to hurt Alessia, but seeing her walk confidently with Lucas stirred an unfamiliar, uncomfortable feeling in his chest. He hated to admit it, but he underestimated her strength. Alessia finally stopped near the altar where Lucas released her hand briefly, giving her a moment to breathe. "I'm sorry," he murmured softly. "I know you didn't expect today to be like this." Alessia shook her head, tears glistening in her eyes, but her lips curved into a small smile. "I'm not sorry. Today, I realized who really matters." Her eyes met Lucas's, and for a moment, everything around them disappeared. Clara leaned closer, whispering, "You see, this is exactly why you needed him. Ethan never deserved you." Alessia nodded, but the storm wasn't over. Victoria's expression darkened, her jealousy simmering. She moved closer to Lucas, pretending to adjust her dress. "I think, Lucas, you need someone to remind you who's really important," she said, her tone sharp, almost challenging. Lucas didn't flinch. His eyes were fixed on Alessia. "I'm not interested in reminders. I'm interested in what's real," he replied quietly, enough for Alessia to hear. Victoria's jaw tightened. She realized that not only had Lucas chosen Alessia, but he chose her with conviction, something Victoria had never managed to earn. Ethan's mother, who had been silent until now, stepped forward hesitantly. "Ethan, what are you doing? This isn't like you," she said, her voice trembling. But Ethan waved her off. "I'm finally honest, Mother. I made my choice." "Your choice?" Margaret Monroe shouted, her voice echoing in the church. "You humiliated my daughter in front of everyone. How is that honesty?" Ethan didn't answer. Vanessa tightened her grip on his arm and whispered, "Ignore them. You're free now." But Ethan's mind wasn't at ease. Watching Alessia recover with dignity, walking with someone who truly loved her, pierced something in him he hadn't expected: regret. Clara, seeing Ethan hesitate, nudged Alessia gently. "Ignore him. Don't give him the satisfaction. Look at Lucas. Look at you." Alessia's eyes met Lucas's again. I feel safe with you, she whispered, her voice soft but certain. Lucas's lips curved into a small, reassuring smile. And you will always be, Alessia. Always. From the corner, Victoria's grip on her clutch tightened. She took a deep breath, attempting to compose herself. But jealousy had clouded her judgment. She wanted to interrupt, to make a scene, to force Lucas to look at her. Instead, she froze, realizing her feelings weren't enough to compete with years of love and loyalty. Meanwhile, Ethan's face had gone pale. Watching Alessia smile at Lucas, seeing her glow with relief and confidence, he felt the first sting of regret. Vanessa's excitement faltered as she noticed the change in Ethan. "What is it?" she asked, her voice sharp now. I didn't expect her to handle this so gracefully," Ethan muttered, more to himself than to her. Vanessa's eyes widened. "You're worried?" she asked incredulously. Alessia and Lucas continued walking, stopping at the front of the church. Lucas took her hand gently, guiding her to a spot where she could face the crowd. "You're stronger than you realize," he said softly. "And today, you've shown everyone that." The priest, regaining his composure, cleared his throat. "Well, it seems the ceremony has taken an unexpected turn." His eyes flicked nervously between Ethan, Vanessa, and the newly formed pair. Alessia took a deep breath. "I don't need a ceremony to prove my worth," she said confidently, her voice carrying throughout the hall. "What matters is who stands by you when the world tries to break you." Clara wiped a tear from her cheek. "That's my girl," she whispered. Margaret and Richard exchanged glances, pride evident on both their faces. "Lucas, thank you," Margaret said, her voice trembling. "For seeing her, for being here." Lucas only smiled modestly. "She deserved it," he replied. "More than anyone could imagine." Ethan's shoulders slumped slightly. He had thought he would feel victorious, but instead, he felt the bitter taste of loss. Vanessa, noticing the shift in power, whispered urgently, "We need to leave. Now." But Ethan hesitated, his mind replaying every moment. Alessia's strength, her grace, her unwavering presence, it all haunted him. Victoria Sterling, despite her heartbreak, finally turned her gaze away. She realized this was Lucas's moment, Alessia's moment, and she could not force herself into it. Her lips pressed into a thin line as she walked toward the exit, her dignity intact, but her plan shattered. Alessia finally let herself breathe. The storm had passed, replaced with a quiet but intense calm. Lucas squeezed her hand gently. "You've been through so much today," he said softly. "But look at you. You didn't crumble. You stood tall." "I had to," Alessia replied, tears glistening in her eyes. "I couldn't let him, or anyone, see me broken." She looked at Lucas fully, her smile genuine now. "Thank you for being here." Lucas leaned close, his voice warm and low. "I've always been here, Alessia. And I always will be." Clara stepped forward, smiling through her tears. "Now that's the kind of wedding I wanted for you. Who needs flowers and music when you have love like this?" The church seemed to hum with quiet admiration. Guests whispered, some clapped softly, others wiped tears. Alessia's parents, still recovering from the shock, smiled proudly. The moment had transformed into something far more meaningful than any ceremony could have provided. Even Ethan finally turned away, his mind spinning. Vanessa tugged at his arm, whispering, "Let's go." But Ethan paused, watching Alessia and Lucas walk together. He had wanted to humiliate her, but instead, he had witnessed her rise, stronger, happier, and loved by someone who truly deserved her heart. Alessia, now standing beside Lucas, looked around the church. "This is better than I imagined," she said softly. Lucas smiled down at her. "Because you're not just a bride today. You're a woman who knows her worth." The subtle click of Victoria Sterling's heels receding from the room reminded everyone that jealousy, heartbreak, and pride had played their part, but in the end, true love had won. As Lucas led Alessia through the aisle, Clara whispered, "And the best part? This story is just beginning." Alessia laughed softly, a sound of relief and happiness. She felt lighter than she had all morning. "Yes," she said. "Just the beginning." The couple stepped outside into the afternoon sun, the church doors swinging open behind them. Guests followed, some smiling, some still whispering in shock, but all witnessing the turning of a page. Alessia held Lucas's hand tightly, knowing that no matter what the world threw at her, she had someone who would never let go. Margaret and Richard followed, their expressions a mix of pride and joy. Clara skipped ahead, playful and teasing, but her eyes never left Alessia. Even Victoria Sterling paused at the edge of the crowd, taking one last look at Lucas and Alessia before walking away silently. Lucas leaned close, brushing a strand of hair from Alessia's face. "I think this is exactly how it should have happened," he whispered. Alessia nodded, her eyes shining with love and relief. "Yes, it was supposed to be you all along." The church bells rang in the distance, marking the end of one story and the beginning of another, a story of love, courage, and triumph over heartbreak. And as they walked into the sunlight, Alessia whispered softly, almost to herself, "Thank you for being my unexpected hero." Lucas smiled, his arm around her shoulders. "Always," he replied, his voice steady, full of promise. The crowd watched, stunned but smiling. Some clapped softly, others simply watched the couple leave, understanding that this was more than just a wedding, it was a lesson in love, loyalty, and resilience. The afternoon sun spilled across the church courtyard, glinting off Alessia's gown as she and Lucas stepped out together. Guests trailed behind, whispers still fluttering like nervous birds. Even outside, Alessia couldn't shake the adrenaline, the sudden rush of humiliation followed by triumph, and the dizzying realization that her life had just changed in a single morning. Clara tugged at her arm, her eyes wide. "Alessia, are you okay? I mean, I can't believe that just happened." Alessia smiled softly, though her chest still ached from the shock. "I'm okay. It's strange, but I feel free. I feel like I can finally breathe." She looked at Lucas, who had his gaze fixed on her. His eyes were calm, warm, protective, the kind of look she had always longed for but never expected to find at the altar. Victoria Sterling watched from the edge of the crowd, her hands clenched into fists. Every step Alessia took beside Lucas felt like a blow to her carefully constructed plan. She had thought that today would be her chance to finally make Lucas see her, to finally claim the love she believed was hers. But Alessia had stolen that moment effortlessly, and Victoria felt her composure slipping. Lucas sensed her stare. He didn't flinch. "Victoria," he said evenly, "there's nothing left to discuss between us." Victoria's lips pressed into a tight line. "Oh, there's always something left," she replied, her voice sharp, but there was no real threat behind it. Lucas simply shook his head, his eyes returning to Alessia. Alessia squeezed his hand lightly, comforted by his unwavering focus on her. "Don't mind her," she whispered. "She doesn't matter." Lucas smiled, brushing a stray hair from her face. "Exactly. You do." Richard Monroe, Alessia's father, finally broke the silence. "Lucas, I have to admit, I didn't know you'd be brave enough to step in like that," he said, a mixture of respect and lingering anger in his voice. "But you've proven yourself today. My daughter deserves someone who will never abandon her. Someone who stands when the world tries to tear her down." Lucas nodded solemnly. "I would never abandon her, sir. Not now, not ever." Margaret Monroe stepped forward, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Alessia, my sweet girl, you've been humiliated in front of everyone, but you handled it with so much dignity. I am so proud of you." Alessia swallowed hard, emotion choking her voice. "Thank you, Mom, for always believing in me," Clara interjected, her playful tone hiding the lingering tension. "And me. Don't forget me. I had to drag you here this morning, you know." She nudged Alessia lightly, making her laugh for the first time that day. But the peace was fragile. Vanessa Hart, still lingering near Ethan, muttered something sharp, "This isn't over. He'll regret this." Ethan's jaw tightened. He had always thought of himself as untouchable. But watching Alessia walk with Lucas, seeing the glow of confidence and joy around her, it stirred a bitter feeling inside him he didn't know how to handle. For the first time, he felt the sting of losing someone he once thought belonged to him. Lucas guided Alessia to a quiet spot near the fountain, away from the whispers and stares. "Are you sure you're okay?" he asked gently. His hand rested lightly on hers, reassuring, grounding. Alessia nodded, though a shiver ran through her. "I am. It's just, everything happened so fast. One moment, I thought my life was perfect, and the next, everything I imagined was gone." She paused, looking at him. "But then you were there." Lucas smiled softly, his eyes never leaving hers. "I'll always be here, Alessia. You don't have to worry about being alone again." Alessia felt a warmth in her chest, a steady comfort she hadn't known she needed. I don't know what to say," she admitted. "You don't have to say anything," Lucas said. "Just promise me something. Promise me you'll never let anyone make you feel small or worthless again." Alessia's lips trembled as she nodded. "I promise." Meanwhile, Victoria Sterling lingered on the edge of the courtyard, her thoughts a swirl of envy and disbelief. She had wanted Lucas for herself, but Alessia had stolen the moment, stolen the men she had coveted. Her chest tightened, and she clenched her jaw, forcing herself to walk away without making a scene. But inside, her jealousy was burning like fire. Clara, sensing the tension in the air, leaned close to Alessia and whispered, "Ignore her. Today is about you. You've survived the worst morning of your life, and now you're standing taller than ever." Alessia smiled faintly, feeling strength return with every step she took. The humiliation, the shock, and the heartbreak, it had all been swallowed by the truth she had just realized: Lucas loved her. And that love was real. It was solid. It was unwavering. Ethan, standing behind Vanessa, finally spoke, his voice low and tight. She's glowing with him. I can't believe it." Vanessa frowned. "You did this to her. You humiliated her, Ethan." "How can you feel?" She trailed off, unable to finish her thought. Alessia, noticing the tension, spoke softly but firmly, her voice carrying across the courtyard. "Ethan, Vanessa, it's over. Whatever you thought you were doing, it doesn't matter anymore. I've moved on." Ethan's hands clenched into fists. You don't understand." I understand perfectly," Alessia interrupted, her eyes flashing. "You chose to humiliate me for your selfish desires. But Lucas chose to stand by me. He chose to fight for me. And that choice, that's what matters." Lucas gently placed a hand on her shoulder. "You don't have to explain anything more. You've already shown strength beyond what anyone expected." Alessia's chest swelled with emotion. This was not just about a wedding gone wrong, it was about reclaiming her dignity, her life, and her heart. And with Lucas by her side, she knew she had won in ways Ethan and Vanessa could never understand. Margaret and Richard approached, beaming. "Alessia, this is your day, truly," Margaret said, her voice thick with emotion. "And we're proud of how you handled everything. No one can take that from you." Richard nodded. "You've shown courage and grace. Today, you became unstoppable." Alessia felt tears prick her eyes but smiled warmly. "Thank you, both of you. I couldn't have done it without Clara and Lucas. Clara laughed softly. And me. Don't forget me. Lucas laughed too, a quiet, gentle sound that made Alessia feel safe. Clara, you're unforgettable. But today. Alessia, you take the spotlight. As the crowd began to disperse, guests whispering about the shocking turn of events, Lucas and Alessia walked together, hand in hand, toward the garden where sunlight streamed through the trees. It was quiet, almost serene, a stark contrast to the chaos of the morning. Alessia looked up at Lucas, her heart pounding. Do you think everything happened for a reason? Lucas smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. I do. If Ethan hadn't made his choice, if Vanessa hadn't shown up, we might not be standing here, together, like this. Alessia laughed softly. I guess you're right. It's strange, but I feel like I've finally found where I'm meant to be. Lucas's eyes softened, full of warmth and promise. And you've always been meant to be with me. You just needed to see it for yourself. Clara, noticing their intimate moment, nudged Alessia playfully. See? I told you he'd show up. And better than you ever imagined. Alessia smiled, squeezing Lucas's hand. Yes, better than I ever imagined. Meanwhile, Victoria Sterling finally turned away completely, her figure retreating from the garden. She had lost, yes, but she had also learned something important. Love cannot be forced. It can only be chosen freely. Ethan, watching from a distance, felt a deep pang of regret. He had tried to manipulate, to control, to hurt, but it had all failed. Alessia's strength and Lucas's loyalty had triumphed over his arrogance. Lucas leaned closer to Alessia, whispering, no matter what comes next. I'll always protect you. I promise. Alessia's lips curved into a smile, her eyes shining. And I'll always trust you, Lucas. Always. The sun dipped lower, casting a golden glow over the garden. For the first time all day, Alessia felt peace. The pain, humiliation, and heartbreak of the morning had been replaced by a quiet, steadfast joy. She had been dumped, humiliated, and betrayed, but in the end, she had found love, loyalty, and the promise of a future that felt more perfect than she had ever dreamed. And as they walked together, side by side, Alessia knew one thing for certain: sometimes, the worst moments lead to the most beautiful beginnings. The garden was quiet, the hum of the city fading behind the tall hedges, leaving Alessia and Lucas in their own world. The chaos of the morning, the humiliation, the whispers, the shock, had melted into a memory that already felt distant, replaced by the warmth of Lucas's presence beside her. Alessia looked up at him, eyes shining. It's strange how everything fell apart today, yet I feel like I've gained everything. Lucas smiled, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. Sometimes life has to break a little to give us what we truly deserve, he said softly. And today, it gave us this moment. Alessia laughed, a sound pure and light. I never thought a wedding could turn out like this. Lucas leaned closer, their foreheads almost touching. Neither did I, he murmured. But maybe perfect isn't what we imagined, it's what we feel, what we build together. Alessia's heart swelled. She had dreamed of a fairy tale wedding, but she had learned something far more valuable: love that chooses you, that stands by you, that never abandons you. She reached up, her fingers brushing his cheek. Lucas. I think I've always known it was you. And I've always known it was you, Alessia, he replied, his voice firm, unwavering. I just had to wait for the right moment, for you to see it too. The sound of footsteps approaching made them turn. Clara, giggling and wiping tears from her eyes, came running. There you are. I was starting to think you two had disappeared into your own little world. She winked. But you know what? I'm glad you did. Because this is perfect. Alessia smiled at her best friend. Thank you, Clara, for everything. Margaret and Richard appeared behind them, their smiles radiant. Margaret's voice trembled as she spoke. Alessia, my sweet girl, you've endured so much today. And yet, here you are, stronger than ever. I am so proud of you. Richard nodded, his eyes glinting with pride. You've taught us all a lesson today, Alessia. About courage, about dignity, and about love. Alessia's cheeks warmed. She had felt humiliated, betrayed, even heartbroken earlier, but now every emotion seemed to converge into something beautiful. She glanced at Lucas, taking his hand in hers. I couldn't have done this without you, she whispered. Lucas shook his head. You did this yourself. I only stood by your side. You chose to rise. You chose to trust. That's what made everything possible. Meanwhile, Victoria Sterling watched from a distance, her face pale, her composure finally cracking. She had hoped for Lucas's attention, had fantasized about today being her moment. But Alessia's resilience and Lucas's unwavering love had shown her a truth she couldn't deny: love cannot be forced, nor stolen, it is given freely. With a deep breath, she turned and walked away, leaving the couple to their victory. Ethan Cole and Vanessa Hart lingered awkwardly at the edge of the courtyard. Ethan's face was ashen, his arrogance completely stripped away. Watching Alessia's joy, seeing her walk confidently with Lucas, he felt the weight of his mistake for the first time. Vanessa, sensing his hesitation, whispered sharply, "We should leave." But Ethan hesitated, eyes locked on Alessia. Guilt gnawed at him. For once, he didn't feel victorious, he felt small, and for the first time, he understood the consequences of selfishness and cruelty. Alessia, noticing Ethan's retreat, turned back to Lucas. He'll never understand, she said softly, shaking her head. Lucas nodded, a protective warmth in his eyes. No. But that's okay. Because we do. They walked toward a secluded fountain, the sunlight catching in Alessia's hair, making her glow in a way that even the morning chaos hadn't diminished. Lucas held her hand tightly, their fingers entwined. I've waited for this day, he whispered. Not for a wedding, not for a moment of grandeur, but for this. For you. Alessia's heart thumped. And I've waited too, she said, her voice soft, full of emotion. Waited for someone who truly sees me, who stands by me no matter what. Lucas stepped closer, lifting her hand to his lips and pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. You deserve the world, Alessia, and I'll spend every day making sure you have it. Tears filled her eyes, but this time, they were tears of relief, of joy, of love that had been patient and true. Lucas. I love you, she whispered. I love you too, he replied, his voice steady, unwavering. More than words can ever say. And I always will. Clara, watching the intimate moment, couldn't help but smile. Finally, she muttered, wiping tears from her cheeks. Alessia laughed softly, brushing a tear away. Yes, finally. Margaret and Richard stepped closer, smiling warmly. Lucas, welcome to the family, Margaret said. You've always been the man Alessia deserved. Richard nodded. And Alessia, you've proven today that no one can break you. No one can diminish your strength. This is your victory. Lucas pulled Alessia gently into his arms. The sunlight shimmered around them, the garden filled with the quiet hum of leaves and distant city sounds. In that moment, nothing else mattered but their hearts, beating in unison. Alessia rested her head against his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. I feel like I've been given a second chance, she whispered. Lucas kissed the top of her head. No, you've always had a chance. You just needed someone to remind you of your worth. The guests who remained began to clap softly, moved by the sheer intensity of the love and courage they had witnessed. Even those who had hoped for scandal found themselves touched by Alessia's dignity and Lucas's unwavering devotion. Clara nudged Alessia playfully. See. This is way better than any wedding ceremony we could have planned. You got drama, heartbreak, and the perfect romantic ending. All in one day." Alessia laughed, the sound full of relief and joy. "I guess life really does write the best stories," she said. Lucas pulled her closer, their foreheads touching. "And this is just the beginning. Every day from now on, we get to write our own story. Together." Alessia nodded, feeling her heart swell with hope and love. Yes, together. As they walked hand in hand, ready to face whatever came next, Alessia realized that being dumped, humiliated, and betrayed had led her to something far more beautiful than she could have imagined. And in that golden afternoon light, with Lucas by her side, Alessia understood that love that is patient, loyal, and true is worth waiting for, worth fighting for, and worth everything. The sun dipped lower, casting a soft glow over the garden. The bells from the church rang faintly in the distance, a reminder of what had been lost, and what had been gained. Alessia squeezed Lucas's hand, smiling up at him. "Thank you for being my unexpected hero." Lucas smiled, his eyes full of promise. "Always, Alessia. Always." The crowd clapped gently, some wiping tears from their eyes. Clara laughed softly. Now that is a wedding story for the books. And with that, Alessia and Lucas walked toward a future that was finally theirs, romantic, hopeful, and full of love that could never be shaken. If you loved this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more captivating stories.